When my husband's family gathered for our 5th anniversary dinner and his mother announced that I should be, quote, grateful for marrying above my station, I quietly excused myself to the powder room and transferred $15 million from my private investment account to finalize the divorce papers I had been preparing for months. 6 weeks later, in a Manhattan courtroom filled with his shocked relatives, they discovered that the woman they had spent years treating like charity case was actually worth $84 million and owned the pharmaceutical patents that funded their entire lifestyle. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Waterford crystal chandelier cast prismatic rainbows across the mahogany dining table of the Blackstone family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, where 8-place settings awaited the arrival of what I now understood would be my final performance as the grateful daughter-in-law. The September evening air carried the scent of old money through windows that had been polished to perfection by staff whose salaries were subsidized by pharmaceutical royalties they had never connected to the quiet woman who had married into their dynasty 5 years earlier. Victoria Blackstone adjusted the French silk arrangement centerpiece with the precision of someone accustomed to managing appearances for maximum social impact. Her movements carried the authority of generational wealth built on pharmaceutical manufacturing, though the mathematical foundations of that success remained invisible to everyone seated around her table. The family matriarch had spent decades cultivating an image of benevolent superiority, hosting charity galas and cultural events that enhanced the Blackstone reputation, while carefully maintaining social hierarchies that reinforced her position at the apex of Connecticut society. My husband Richard emerged from the wine cellar carrying a 1995 Bordeaux that cost more than most families spent on transportation annually. His selection process had involved consulting 3 different sommelier guides, seeking validation for choices that reflected his education at exclusive institutions, rather than any genuine expertise about viticulture or wine appreciation. The careful curation of every detail, from glassware to conversation topics, represented the Blackstone family approach to social interaction as performance art designed to reinforce their cultural and economic position within Greenwich society. The guest list for tonight's anniversary celebration included Richard's parents, his sister Caroline, and her investment banker husband, plus his brother Michael, who managed trust fund distributions with the casual authority of someone who had never questioned the source of wealth he helped administer. Each family member occupied carefully defined roles within the Blackstone social architecture, their relationships governed by protocols that had been established over decades of practicing inherited privilege as both identity and responsibility. My own background had been systematically minimized through 5 years of subtle but persistent narrative management by family members who found my presence easier to accept when contextualized, as Richard's charitable gesture towards someone less fortunate. Victoria regularly reminded others about my middle-class origins in suburban New Jersey, my state university education, and my modest employment history before marriage, constructing a story that positioned their acceptance of me as evidence of their democratic values and generous spirits. The transformation from Dr. Elena Vasquez, biochemist and pharmaceutical entrepreneur, to Elena Blackstone, grateful family edition, had been so gradual that I had initially mistaken systematic diminishment for normal adjustment challenges within established family dynamics. Graduate school had taught me to recognize complex molecular interactions, but it had not prepared me to identify the subtle mechanisms through which accomplished women disappear into supporting roles within social structures designed to maintain existing hierarchies. My doctoral dissertation had focused on targeted drug delivery systems for autoimmune disorders, research that had generated 12 patents and 3 FDA-approved medications, currently generating $127 million in annual revenue. The technical expertise required to develop these innovations demanded understanding of biochemistry, molecular engineering, and pharmaceutical manufacturing processes that exceeded the knowledge possessed by anyone seated around tonight's dinner table, though my contributions had been carefully excluded from family narratives about Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' success. The irony of celebrating my anniversary in a home, furnished through royalties from my own intellectual property, while family members discussed my good fortune in joining their social circle, created cognitive dissonance that I had spent months learning to process without external reaction. Every piece of furniture, Every art acquisition, every staffing decision had been funded through pharmaceutical patents that bore my name as primary inventor. Though the Blackstone family had never connected their lifestyle to the innovations that enabled their continued prosperity. Richard's approach to our relationship had evolved from genuine partnership during our dating period to something resembling benevolent patronage after our wedding ceremony. His initial fascination with my scientific expertise had transformed into gentle discouragement of technical discussions that made other family members uncomfortable, replacing intellectual collaboration with social coaching, designed to help me navigate cultural expectations I had supposedly never encountered in my previous environment. The family's charitable initiatives included substantial donations to medical research organizations, their generosity praised in society publications that highlighted Blackstone's commitment to advancing healthcare innovation. Yet none of these family members possessed sufficient technical knowledge to evaluate the research they funded. Their philanthropy, guided by social advisors who recommended causes likely to enhance their reputation, rather than genuine understanding of scientific priorities or breakthrough potential. Caroline Blackstone Wells represented the family standard for appropriate feminine achievement, her Harvard MBA credentials and museum board positions demonstrating intellectual capacity channeled through socially acceptable outlets that complemented rather than competed with masculine authority structures. Her marriage to investment banker James Wells had been celebrated as strategic alliance between compatible families, their relationship built on shared cultural background and aligned financial interests, rather than intellectual partnership or personal passion. Michael Blackstone's role as family financial manager required mathematical skills that enabled him to track investment performance and trust fund distributions, without demanding the deeper analytical capabilities needed to understand the pharmaceutical innovations generating the wealth he administered. His competence within established parameters was genuine, though his expertise did not extend to evaluating the scientific breakthroughs that produced the intellectual property portfolios underlying family prosperity. The dinner conversation followed predictable patterns as family members discussed charitable obligations, travel plans, and social commitments that filled their calendars with activities designed to maintain cultural influence and business relationships. Their priorities reflected generations of inherited wealth, focusing on preservation and social positioning rather than innovation or intellectual achievement that might disrupt established hierarchies or create uncomfortable questions about merit versus birthright. Victoria's preparation for tonight's anniversary celebration had included consultation with event planners who specialized in family gatherings designed to reinforce social bonds while managing potential conflicts through careful attention to seating arrangements, conversation topics, and symbolic gestures that honored traditional family values. Every detail had been curated to create the impression of spontaneous warmth while actually representing calculated management of interpersonal dynamics. My own preparation for this evening had involved different considerations entirely. The past 18 months had been spent documenting financial irregularities in Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' accounting practices, consulting with intellectual property attorneys about patent ownership structures, and developing comprehensive understanding of legal mechanisms available to address systematic appropriation of pharmaceutical innovations by family members who possessed business degrees but lacked scientific expertise to create the intellectual property they claimed. The manila folder in my Hermes briefcase contained documentation that would redefine every relationship around tonight's dinner table, evidence that the woman they had spent 5 years treating as fortunate recipient of their social acceptance was actually the architect of innovations that funded their entire lifestyle. Bank records, patent filings, royalty statements, and licensing agreements told a mathematical story about intellectual property ownership that contradicted every assumption underlying Blackstone family dynamics. Patrory. Dr. Jennifer Morrison, my patent attorney, had spent 6 months reviewing pharmaceutical licensing agreements that generated wealth the Blackstone family administered without understanding the technical innovations that made their prosperity possible. Her analysis revealed systematic appropriation of intellectual property through corporate structures designed to obscure the connection between scientific breakthrough and financial reward. Legal arrangements that had been crafted to maintain family control while minimizing recognition of external contributions. The divorce papers had been finalized 2 weeks earlier, though Richard and his family remained unaware of legal proceedings that would transfer $47 million in pharmaceutical assets to accounts bearing only my name. The mathematical precision of financial dissolution reflected years of careful documentation and strategic planning by legal professionals who specialized in complex asset division involving intellectual property rights and corporate ownership structures. Elena Vasquez Biochemical Innovations had been incorporated as Delaware C Corporation with headquarters in Princeton, New Jersey, positioning the company for pharmaceutical partnerships that bypassed Blackstone family involvement while maintaining my complete control over innovations that had been systematically attributed to their existing business operations. The new corporate structure represented liberation from family dynamics that had subordinated scientific achievement to social positioning and cultural performance art. My grandmother, Sofia Vasquez, had immigrated from Colombia with advanced chemistry knowledge and pharmaceutical experience that enabled her to establish successful laboratory consulting practice in Newark during the 1970s. Her handwritten notebooks contained formulation insights and molecular analysis techniques that had informed my own research into autoimmune therapeutics, creating intellectual legacy that connected generations of women scientists who had overcome cultural barriers to achieve meaningful innovation. The molecular engineering principles underlying my pharmaceutical patents required understanding of biochemical interactions at cellular level, knowledge that demanded years of graduate study and laboratory research experience that none of the Blackstone family members possessed, despite their willingness to accept credit for innovations they could not replicate or explain to scientific peers, who evaluated pharmaceutical claims based on technical merit rather than social connections. Tonight's anniversary celebration would mark the culmination of systematic preparation designed to address 5 years of intellectual appropriation and social diminishment through legal mechanisms that restored proper attribution for scientific achievements, while ensuring financial compensation reflected actual contribution to pharmaceutical innovation rather than inherited position within established business hierarchy. Richard's confidence as he selected wine for tonight's dinner reflected assumptions about family dynamics and financial security that would be fundamentally challenged by revelations contained within legal documents that had been prepared with mathematical precision by attorneys who specialized in intellectual property disputes involving corporate family structures and systematic appropriation of scientific innovations. The Waterford crystal gleamed under chandelier lighting as I calculated the precise moment when polite social performance would transform into legal accountability, when the woman they had treated as grateful addition to their social circle would reveal herself as the scientific innovator whose intellectual property had funded 5 years of lifestyle they had assumed represented birthright rather than borrowed prosperity. The evening ahead would demonstrate that authentic achievement ultimately overcomes inherited advantage when legal documentation confronts manufactured narrative, proving that mathematical truth possesses power to reshape social hierarchies built on assumptions rather than evidence. Tonight's dinner represented the final performance in a 5-year production that had systematically underestimated the capabilities of a woman whose scientific expertise exceeded the combined knowledge of everyone seated around the Blackstone family table. The transformation from overlooked family member to empowered intellectual property owner had required patience, strategic thinking, and comprehensive preparation that would ensure tonight's revelations carried permanent consequences for family members who had confused social position with actual achievement. The molecular precision that characterized my pharmaceutical research would now be applied to social engineering, designed to restore proper attribution for innovations that had been systematically appropriated by people who possessed business degrees but lacked scientific knowledge to create breakthrough therapeutics. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As Victoria called the family to dinner, I touched the briefcase containing documents that would redefine every relationship in this room. Mathematical proof that the woman they had patronized as fortunate beneficiary of their acceptance was actually the architect of intellectual achievements that exceeded their collective contributions to pharmaceutical science. Tonight's anniversary celebration would become a lesson in the difference between inherited position and earned authority, between social performance and scientific innovation, between assumed superiority and documented expertise. The appetizer course proceeded with choreographed precision, as staff members served pan-seared scallops arranged on Limoges porcelain that had been acquired through pharmaceutical royalties. The Blackstone family attributed to generations of business acumen rather than recent biochemical innovations. Victoria Blackstone began her customary anniversary toast by recounting the family history of Richard's courtship, her narrative carefully constructed to emphasize his generosity in pursuing someone from a different social background, while minimizing any reference to my professional qualifications or intellectual achievements. My handbag contained the Samsung Galaxy smartphone that had been recording family conversations for the past 14 months, capturing audio evidence that would support intellectual property litigation by documenting systematic patterns of credit appropriation and financial misrepresentation. The device represented insurance against potential legal challenges, ensuring that claims about pharmaceutical innovation ownership would be supported by recorded statements from family members who had explicitly acknowledged their dependence on patents they could not identify or explain. Richard raised his wineglass with practiced elegance, his toast focusing on gratitude for family acceptance and social integration that had supposedly transformed my life prospects through marriage, to someone of superior background and connections. His words carried genuine warmth combined with condescending undertones that had become increasingly pronounced over recent months, as his confidence in family financial security eliminated any concern about maintaining genuine partnership or intellectual respect within our relationship. The conversation shifted to Carolyn's recent appointment to the board of Metropolitan Museum of Art, her cultural credentials demonstrating appropriate channels for feminine achievement within social structures that celebrated women for supporting, rather than creating intellectual or economic value. Her Harvard MBA had been applied to nonprofit administration and cultural philanthropy, activities that enhanced family reputation without competing with masculine authority in pharmaceutical business operations or scientific research. Michael Blackstone discussed recent trust fund performance with satisfaction that reflected his competence in managing inherited wealth rather than creating new sources of revenue or intellectual property. His financial expertise enabled effective administration of resources without requiring understanding of biochemical research, patent development, or pharmaceutical manufacturing processes that generated the intellectual property portfolios he supervised through traditional investment strategies. Victoria's attention turned to my appearance with comments about designer clothing selections that had been purchased through discretionary funds derived from my own pharmaceutical patents. Her approval of fashion choices that met Blackstone family standards carried implicit criticism of my previous wardrobe selections, suggesting that marriage had provided access to quality and sophistication I had supposedly never encountered during my middle-class upbringing in suburban New Jersey. The systematic erasure of my professional identity had accelerated following our honeymoon period, as family social gatherings increasingly featured introductions that described me as Richard's wife rather than Dr. Elena Vasquez, biochemist and pharmaceutical entrepreneur. The gradual transformation from scientist to spouse had been so subtle that I had initially attributed diminished professional recognition to normal adjustment challenges within established family dynamics rather than deliberate social engineering. My doctoral advisor at Rutgers University had warned about industry practices that minimized recognition for female scientists whose innovations generated substantial pharmaceutical revenues, while credit was systematically transferred to male colleagues or corporate administrators who possessed business credentials but lacked technical expertise to create breakthrough therapeutics. Professor Sarah Chen had experienced similar appropriation during her career at major pharmaceutical companies, her warnings about documentation and legal protection proving prescient as I recognized patterns she had described. The appetizer conversation revealed how completely family members had compartmentalized their lifestyle from its intellectual property foundations, discussing charitable giving and cultural activities without connecting their prosperity to ongoing pharmaceutical royalties generated by autoimmune therapeutics I had developed during graduate school research. Their inability to explain the scientific basis for Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' success indicated genuine ignorance about molecular engineering rather than deliberate concealment of technical knowledge. Richard's description of our relationship emphasized his role as cultural mentor, who had introduced me to social opportunities and professional networks that supposedly exceeded my previous experience. His narrative positioning himself as generous benefactor rather than equal partner in marriage built on mutual respect and intellectual collaboration. The condescension embedded in his anniversary toast revealed fundamental misunderstanding of my background, capabilities, and financial resources. The main course arrived as conversation topics shifted to upcoming charity galas and cultural events that filled Blackstone family social calendars with activities designed to maintain community influence and business relationships. Their discussion of pharmaceutical industry donations to medical research organizations demonstrated philanthropic generosity funded by royalties from my own intellectual property, though none of the family members possessed sufficient technical knowledge to evaluate the research they supported through charitable contributions. Carolyn's museum board responsibilities included oversight of science education initiatives that promoted biochemical research and pharmaceutical innovation. Her administrative role connecting family philanthropy to fields that directly benefited from therapeutic developments I had created during graduate study. The irony of supporting scientific advancement through donations funded by appropriated intellectual property created cognitive dissonance that required conscious effort to process without external reaction. Victoria's comments about family social standing included references to pharmaceutical industry relationships that enhanced Blackstone's reputation within Connecticut business communities. Their professional credibility built on innovations they could not replicate or explain to scientific peers who evaluated therapeutic claims based on technical merit rather than inherited position. The mathematical foundations of their prosperity remained invisible to family members who associated wealth with birthright rather than intellectual achievement. Michael's discussion of investment strategies included pharmaceutical sector analysis that demonstrated genuine expertise in financial management, without corresponding understanding of drug development processes, molecular engineering principles, or regulatory approval mechanisms that determined whether biochemical innovations would generate commercial success or research failure. His competence within established parameters was legitimate though limited to administrative rather than creative functions. The conversation patterns revealed systematic exclusion of technical topics that might highlight my expertise in molecular biology, pharmaceutical manufacturing, or intellectual property development, family dynamics designed to maintain comfortable social interactions without challenging established hierarchies or creating uncomfortable questions about merit versus inheritance. My scientific knowledge had been gradually redefined as professional interest rather than defining expertise. Richard's anniversary gifts included jewelry purchased through discretionary spending accounts, funded by pharmaceutical royalties, that exceeded his understanding of biochemical innovation. His generosity enabled by intellectual property revenues he had never connected to his wife's research capabilities or patent portfolio. The Cartier bracelet represented thoughtful gesture funded by innovations he could not identify, despite benefiting from their commercial success. The dining room walls displayed pharmaceutical industry awards and recognition certificates that honored Blackstone family contributions to healthcare advancement. Their achievements representing legitimate business acumen applied to intellectual property management rather than scientific breakthrough or therapeutic innovation. The distinction between administrative competence and creative achievement had been systematically blurred through corporate structures designed to consolidate credit while distributing financial benefits. My own recognition as pharmaceutical innovator remained confined to technical publications and patent documentation that family members had never reviewed. My scientific reputation invisible within social contexts that prioritized cultural credentials and charitable activities over intellectual achievement or professional expertise. The separation between scientific identity and social presentation had become complete through 5 years of systematic diminishment. The dessert course provided opportunity to observe family dynamics that would be fundamentally altered by revelations contained in legal documents, prepared by intellectual property attorneys who specialized in corporate asset division and patent ownership disputes. Each conversation topic, every casual reference to family prosperity, all assumptions about social hierarchy would be challenged by mathematical evidence that contradicted narratives underlying Blackstone family relationships. Victoria's closing remarks about anniversary celebrations emphasized family unity and shared values that supposedly transcended individual backgrounds, her philosophy reflecting genuine belief in social integration through marriage, while remaining blind to intellectual contributions that funded lifestyle she associated with inherited advantage. The maternal approval carried warmth combined with condescension that would be impossible to maintain following disclosure of financial independence and professional achievement. The evening's performance art reached its crescendo as Richard proposed another toast celebrating 5 years of marriage that had supposedly elevated both partners through social and economic advancement, his gratitude for family acceptance revealing assumptions about our relationship that would be systematically dismantled through legal proceedings designed to restore proper attribution for pharmaceutical innovations that exceeded collective family expertise. The baccarat crystal stemware caught candlelight as I calculated precise timing for revelations that would transform charitable family gathering into legal reckoning, demonstrating that authentic scientific achievement ultimately overcomes inherited position when intellectual property documentation confronts manufactured social narrative. Tonight's anniversary dinner represented the final act in systematic preparation designed to address years of appropriated credit through mechanisms that would ensure permanent recognition of innovations that had been attributed to family members who possessed business degrees but lacked knowledge to create breakthrough therapeutics. The mathematical precision that characterized my pharmaceutical research would soon be applied to social reconstruction designed to restore proper hierarchy between scientific innovation and administrative management, between earned expertise and inherited privilege, between documented achievement and assumed authority. The transformation from grateful family addition to empowered intellectual property owner required patient strategic planning that would ensure tonight's revelations carried consequences proportional to 5 years of systematic diminishment and financial appropriation. As staff members cleared dessert plates purchased through my pharmaceutical royalties, I reviewed mental calculations that would guide legal proceedings designed to separate authentic contributions from borrowed prosperity, ensuring that family members who had confused administrative competence with scientific innovation would discover the mathematical foundations underlying lifestyle they had attributed to birthright, rather than intellectual property created by someone they had systematically underestimated. The evening's final conversations would mark transition from social performance to legal accountability, from charitable tolerance to earned recognition, from inherited advantage to documented expertise. The Blackstone family anniversary celebration would become educational experience about intellectual property ownership, scientific achievement, and the ultimate triumph of mathematical truth over manufactured narrative, when authentic innovation confronts systematic appropriation disguised as generous family acceptance. The limousine ride back to our Manhattan penthouse provided the first genuine solitude I had experienced in months, creating space for processing the comprehensive scope of intellectual appropriation that had been systematically normalized through 5 years of family dynamics designed to obscure my contributions to pharmaceutical innovation. The city lights blurred past tinted windows as I reviewed mental calculations about patent royalties, licensing agreements, and corporate structures that had enabled the Blackstone family to maintain lifestyle funded by innovations they could neither replicate nor explain. Richard occupied the opposite seat reviewing emails from his stockbroker about investment performance, his financial confidence built on portfolio growth generated by pharmaceutical assets he had never connected to his wife's research capabilities. The separation between his administrative role and the scientific foundations of family wealth had become so complete that he genuinely believed inherited business acumen rather than biochemical innovation explained Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' continued prosperity within competitive healthcare markets. The anniversary dinner had revealed how thoroughly family members had compartmentalized their social identity from its intellectual property foundations, discussing charitable activities and cultural commitments without acknowledging dependence on ongoing royalties from autoimmune therapeutics that required molecular engineering expertise exceeding their collective educational background. Their ability to maintain comfortable ignorance about scientific achievements funding their lifestyle demonstrated willful blindness rather than innocent oversight. My Hermes briefcase contained documentation that would challenge every assumption underlying tonight's celebration, evidence that the woman they had patronized as fortunate beneficiary of generous family acceptance possessed pharmaceutical patents generating $127 million annually through licensing agreements with major healthcare corporations. The mathematical precision of royalty calculations contrasted sharply with emotional manipulation disguised as anniversary sentiment. The penthouse elevator ascended through 47 floors of Manhattan real estate purchased with discretionary funds from my intellectual property portfolio, each level marking transition from social performance back to strategic planning that would address systematic credit appropriation through legal mechanisms designed to restore proper attribution for scientific achievements. The building represented authentic luxury earned through innovation rather than inherited through family connections or social positioning. Richard's discussion of weekend plans included charity golf tournaments that would raise funds for medical research organizations, his participation in healthcare philanthropy funded by appropriated pharmaceutical royalties, while remaining ignorant about molecular biology principles underlying therapeutic development. The irony of supporting scientific advancement through donations derived from stolen intellectual property required conscious effort to process without external emotional reaction. Our living room displayed pharmaceutical industry recognition awards honoring contributions to autoimmune research, the certificates bearing my name as primary investigator, while family members accepted public credit for innovations they had never understood or contributed to through actual scientific work. The wall-mounted accolades told accurate story about intellectual achievement that contradicted social narratives, positioning me as grateful recipient of Blackstone family generosity. The master bedroom safe contained original patent applications documenting molecular engineering processes that had generated breakthrough therapeutics, each filing establishing legal ownership of innovations that exceeded the technical knowledge possessed by anyone connected to Blackstone family business operations. The combination lock secured evidence that would transform divorce proceedings from routine asset division into intellectual property litigation involving systematic misappropriation of scientific achievements. My laboratory notebooks from graduate school detailed experimental protocols and theoretical frameworks that had informed pharmaceutical development processes, handwritten documentation that proved conceptual foundations for therapeutic innovations, had been established years before marriage to Richard introduced complications of family dynamics and corporate ownership structures. The chronological evidence would demonstrate independent achievement rather than collaborative development within established business relationships. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, my research partner at Rutgers University, had warned about pharmaceutical industry practices that systematically minimized recognition for female scientists whose innovations generated substantial commercial revenues, while credit was transferred to male colleagues or corporate administrators through carefully constructed narratives about collaborative development and shared achievement. Her predictions about intellectual appropriation had proven accurate, as family dynamics revealed patterns she had observed throughout her academic career. The FDA approval letters for 3 autoimmune therapeutics established regulatory recognition of my scientific contributions through official government documentation that could not be challenged or reinterpreted through family social engineering. The pharmaceutical innovations had satisfied rigorous clinical testing requirements and regulatory oversight procedures that evaluated therapeutic effectiveness based on molecular mechanisms rather than corporate relationships or inherited business credentials. Richard's bedtime routine included reviewing pharmaceutical industry publications that discussed market trends and competitive analysis without connecting reported developments to innovations created by the woman sharing his bedroom. His genuine interest in healthcare business strategies contrasted with complete ignorance about biochemical research methods, regulatory approval processes, or intellectual property development that enabled pharmaceutical companies to maintain market advantages through proprietary therapeutic formulations. The separate bank accounts I had maintained throughout our marriage contained accumulated royalty payments that had been automatically deposited from licensing agreements with major pharmaceutical corporations. Financial independence that remained invisible to family members who associated my economic security with marriage rather than independent professional achievement. The account balances represented mathematical proof of capability and success that exceeded assumptions underlying family social dynamics. My smartphone contained encrypted communications with patent attorneys who had been preparing intellectual property litigation designed to address systematic appropriation of pharmaceutical innovations through corporate structures that obscured connection between scientific achievement and financial reward. The legal team possessed expertise in complex asset division involving family business relationships and disputed ownership of intellectual property portfolios that generated substantial ongoing revenues. The walk-in closet revealed designer clothing purchased through discretionary spending accounts funded by my own pharmaceutical patents, each garment representing authentic luxury rather than charitable gifts from family members who believed their acceptance had provided access to quality and sophistication I had supposedly never encountered during middle-class upbringing. The wardrobe told story of earned prosperity rather than inherited privilege or marital advancement. Elena Vasquez Biochemical Innovations had been incorporated 6 months earlier as Delaware Corporation with headquarters in Princeton. positioning my independent pharmaceutical research company for direct licensing relationships that would bypass Blackstone family involvement while ensuring complete control over future innovations and their commercial applications. The corporate structure represented strategic planning designed to prevent continued intellectual appropriation. My grandmother, Sofia Vasquez, had immigrated from Colombia with advanced chemistry knowledge that informed her successful consulting practice during establishment of pharmaceutical manufacturing operations in New Jersey during the 1970s. Her laboratory notebooks contained molecular analysis techniques and formulation insights that had been inherited, along with financial resources that funded my graduate education and early research activities. The mathematical calculations underlying pharmaceutical patent valuations required expertise in molecular engineering, regulatory compliance, and intellectual property law that exceeded knowledge possessed by family members who had built social identity around business administration rather than scientific innovation. Their competence within established parameters was genuine, though limited to management functions rather than creative or technical achievements. The anniversary gifts I had received represented thoughtful gestures, funded by appropriated intellectual property revenues, genuine emotional investment combined with systematic exploitation that created cognitive dissonance, requiring careful psychological processing. Richard's affection appeared authentic despite his complete ignorance about financial foundations enabling generous gift-giving and lifestyle maintenance. The Blackstone family pharmaceutical business had achieved legitimate success through competent administration of intellectual property portfolios. Their commercial achievements, representing genuine business acumen applied to patent management and regulatory compliance, rather than scientific breakthrough or therapeutic innovation. The distinction between administrative competence and creative achievement had been systematically blurred through 5 years of social engineering designed to obscure contribution sources. The penthouse windows provided panoramic views of Manhattan skyline illuminated by millions of lights, representing individual lives continuing normal patterns, while my own existence underwent fundamental reconstruction through recognition of systematic exploitation disguised as generous family acceptance. The city represented possibilities for authentic achievement based on documented expertise rather than inherited position or social connections. My reflection in bedroom mirrors showed woman transformed by knowledge into someone prepared to reclaim professional identity that had been gradually erased through family dynamics designed to maintain comfortable social hierarchies. The transformation from grateful spouse to empowered pharmaceutical entrepreneur required courage to challenge established relationships based on manufactured narratives rather than mathematical truth about intellectual property ownership. The divorce papers had been finalized through legal proceedings that established my independent financial status, while ensuring appropriate compensation for intellectual property that had been systematically appropriated through family business structures. The mathematical precision of asset division reflected years of careful documentation by attorneys who specialized in complex pharmaceutical patent disputes involving family corporations and disputed ownership claims. The medication bottles in our bathroom cabinet contained therapeutic formulations I had developed during graduate research, prescription drugs that managed autoimmune disorders through molecular mechanisms I had designed, while family members accepted credit for innovations they could neither explain nor replicate. The personal use of my own pharmaceutical achievements created daily reminder of capabilities that had been systematically minimized through social engineering. Tomorrow would bring continued preparation for legal proceedings designed to address 5 years of intellectual appropriation through mechanisms that would ensure permanent recognition of scientific achievements, while providing financial compensation proportional to ongoing commercial success of therapeutic innovations. The strategic planning required patience and precision that reflected scientific training applied to social reconstruction. The weight of comprehensive truth about systematic exploitation had been processed through months of careful analysis and emotional preparation that enabled strategic response based on documented evidence rather than reactive confrontation. The transformation from unknowing victim to empowered legal plaintiff represented personal growth that would inform all future professional and personal relationships. The Blackstone family anniversary celebration would be remembered as final performance in 5-year production that had systematically underestimated capabilities of woman whose pharmaceutical expertise exceeded collective knowledge of everyone who had participated in intellectual appropriation disguised as generous social acceptance. Tonight marked transition from tolerance to accountability, from performance to authenticity, from borrowed prosperity to earned recognition. The morning sun filtered through the penthouse windows as I spread financial documents across our Italian marble dining table, transforming the space where we had hosted countless family dinners into a strategic command center for intellectual property litigation. Each document represented a piece of evidence in the mathematical puzzle that would prove systematic appropriation of pharmaceutical innovations by family members who possessed business credentials but lacked scientific expertise to create breakthrough therapeutics. The Wall Street Journal lay folded beside my coffee cup, its pharmaceutical industry section containing analysis of autoimmune therapeutic markets without acknowledging that 3 of the 5 most profitable medications discussed had been developed through my graduate research at Rutgers University. The disconnect between public recognition and actual innovation reflected industry-wide practices that systematically minimized attribution for female scientists whose work generated substantial commercial revenues. Richard had departed for his morning tennis lesson at the Greenwich Country Club. His routine unchanged by financial dependencies he remained unable to identify or quantify. His confidence in family prosperity had been built on assumptions about inherited wealth rather than recognition of ongoing intellectual property revenues that required continuous innovation and regulatory compliance to maintain market advantages within competitive pharmaceutical sectors. The secure laptop displayed patent portfolio valuations calculated by intellectual property specialists who had spent 6 months analyzing licensing agreements, regulatory approvals, and market penetration data for therapeutic formulations that generated $127 million annually through partnerships with major healthcare corporations. The mathematical precision of these assessments contrasted sharply with emotional manipulation disguised as family generosity that had characterized 5 years of systematic credit appropriation. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, my primary patent attorney, had scheduled our morning conference call to review litigation strategies designed to address complex asset division involving family business relationships and disputed ownership of pharmaceutical innovations. Her expertise in intellectual property law included successful resolution of similar cases, where female scientists had been systematically excluded from recognition and financial compensation for breakthrough therapeutic developments. The smartphone displayed encrypted communications with forensic accountants who had been tracking financial flows between Blackstone Pharmaceuticals and offshore investment accounts that had been established to minimize tax obligations while obscuring the direct connection between my scientific innovations and family lifestyle expenses. Their analysis revealed systematic patterns of revenue diversion that supported luxury purchases and charitable donations funded by appropriated intellectual property. My grandmother, Sofia Vasquez, had maintained detailed laboratory notebooks that documented molecular analysis techniques and pharmaceutical formulation methods that had informed my own research into autoimmune disorders. Her handwritten calculations included theoretical frameworks for targeted drug delivery systems that had been developed 40 years before similar approaches gained mainstream recognition within pharmaceutical research communities. The DNA sequencing equipment in our Manhattan laboratory space represented cutting-edge technology purchased through discretionary funds from patent royalties, scientific instruments that enabled continued biochemical research while family members remained unaware of ongoing innovation activities. The facility had been established under Elena Vasquez Biochemical Innovations, ensuring complete independence from Blackstone family business operations and corporate oversight. The morning routine included review of clinical trial data for next-generation autoimmune therapeutics that would establish additional patent protection while demonstrating continued capability for pharmaceutical innovation. The research pipeline contained 3 promising compounds that addressed molecular mechanisms untargeted by existing therapeutic approaches, ensuring future financial independence regardless of divorce proceedings outcomes. Richard's study contained pharmaceutical industry publications that discussed competitive analysis and market trends, without connecting reported developments to innovations created by the woman who shared his daily life. His genuine interest in healthcare business strategies demonstrated intellectual capacity that remained compartmentalized, from recognition of scientific achievements that enabled his continued prosperity and social positioning. The Federal Express package contained updated financial statements from licensing partnerships that had been established directly with pharmaceutical corporations, bypassing Blackstone family involvement while ensuring transparent documentation of revenue streams. The quarterly reports established my independent economic status through direct commercial relationships that reflected authentic market value for therapeutic innovations. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez had forwarded research publications from major biochemical journals that cited my pharmaceutical patents in their theoretical frameworks. Academic recognition that established scientific credibility within professional communities that evaluated therapeutic claims based on molecular evidence rather than corporate relationships or family connections. The peer review process provided objective validation of intellectual achievements. The master bedroom safe contained original research proposals that had been submitted to National Institutes of Health during graduate school, federal documentation that proved conceptual foundations for pharmaceutical innovations had been established through independent academic work rather than collaborative development within family business structures. The chronological evidence would support intellectual property ownership claims during litigation proceedings. My reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a woman transformed by strategic preparation into someone capable of challenging established power structures through legal mechanisms that prioritized mathematical evidence over social narratives. The transformation from grateful family member to empowered pharmaceutical entrepreneur required comprehensive understanding of corporate law, intellectual property rights, and financial asset protection strategies. The walk-in closet contained designer business attire purchased for upcoming court appearances, professional wardrobe that projected competence and credibility rather than social positioning or cultural performance. Each garment had been selected to support legal representation that would establish my expertise and financial independence through documented evidence rather than emotional appeals or family relationship dynamics. Elena Vasquez Biochemical Innovations had established research partnerships with 3 major university medical centers, academic collaborations that would continue pharmaceutical innovation while ensuring appropriate recognition and financial compensation for breakthrough therapeutic developments. The institutional relationships represented authentic professional network based on scientific merit rather than inherited social connections or family business associations. The financial advisor meeting scheduled for tomorrow would review investment strategies for assets that would be transferred through divorce settlement, portfolio management that reflected conservative approaches to wealth preservation rather than aggressive growth strategies. The mathematical calculations underlying asset allocation demonstrated competence in financial planning that exceeded assumptions about my economic sophistication or investment experience. The legal documents contained detailed analysis of Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' corporate structure, revealing how intellectual property ownership had been systematically obscured through subsidiary corporations and licensing agreements that transferred revenue recognition while maintaining family control over business operations. The forensic accounting had identified systematic patterns of financial manipulation that would support claims for substantial compensatory damages. My smartphone contained recorded conversations with pharmaceutical industry executives who had explicitly acknowledged my role as primary innovator for therapeutic developments that generated ongoing commercial success. The audio evidence would establish professional recognition that contradicted family narratives about collaborative development or shared achievement within established business relationships. The morning conference call with Dr. Martinez revealed additional strategic considerations regarding timing of legal proceedings and media management that would ensure appropriate recognition for scientific achievements while minimizing potential damage to ongoing research partnerships. The litigation strategy balanced comprehensive asset recovery with protection of future pharmaceutical innovation opportunities. The penthouse laboratory space contained molecular modeling software that enabled continued biochemical research into next-generation therapeutic approaches, ensuring that divorce proceedings would not interrupt scientific productivity or compromise intellectual property development. The equipment represented independence from family business resources while maintaining capability for continued innovation and patent development. The financial statements revealed that my independent pharmaceutical research had generated more revenue during the previous 12 months than Blackstone family business operations had produced through their administrative management of existing intellectual property portfolios. The comparative analysis demonstrated that creative innovation exceeded administrative competence in generating authentic wealth and market value. The morning routine concluded with strategic planning for court appearances that would challenge 5 years of intellectual appropriation through legal mechanisms designed to ensure permanent recognition of pharmaceutical achievements while providing financial compensation proportional to ongoing commercial success. The preparation required precision and comprehensive documentation that reflected scientific training applied to legal strategy development. The transformation from underestimated family member to empowered intellectual property owner had required 18 months of systematic preparation, involving legal consultation, financial analysis, and strategic planning that would ensure divorce proceedings addressed substantive issues rather than superficial asset division. The mathematical approach to relationship dissolution reflected capabilities that had been systematically undervalued through family social engineering. The weight of comprehensive evidence supporting intellectual property claims had been processed through months of legal preparation that enabled strategic response based on documented proof rather than emotional reaction to systematic exploitation. The litigation approach prioritized objective truth over subjective interpretation, ensuring that pharmaceutical achievements would receive appropriate recognition and financial compensation regardless of family relationship outcomes. The strategic assessment phase had established foundation for legal proceedings that would demonstrate authentic scientific achievement while exposing systematic appropriation disguised as generous family acceptance. The mathematical precision underlying intellectual property valuation would prove that earned expertise ultimately overcomes inherited privilege when documented evidence confronts manufactured social narratives about contribution and achievement. The Manhattan law offices of Martinez, Chen and Associates occupied 3 floors of a prestigious midtown building, their conference room equipped with security protocols that ensured complete confidentiality for intellectual property litigation involving family business relationships and disputed pharmaceutical patent ownership. The mahogany table reflected morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows as Dr. Jennifer Martinez spread documents that would establish my legal foundation for reclaiming recognition and financial compensation for innovations that had been systematically appropriated. The forensic accounting team had completed their comprehensive analysis of Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' financial records, revealing patterns of revenue diversion that supported luxury expenditures and charitable donations funded by intellectual property they had never created or contributed to through actual scientific work. Their mathematical calculations demonstrated systematic exploitation disguised as family generosity, providing objective evidence that would support substantial compensatory damage claims during divorce proceedings. Margaret Chen, the lead intellectual property specialist, reviewed patent documentation that established my exclusive ownership of molecular engineering processes underlying 3 FDA-approved autoimmune therapeutics. Each filing contained technical specifications that required biochemical expertise exceeding the collective knowledge of all Blackstone family members, proving that innovative foundations for their pharmaceutical wealth originated from sources they had never acknowledged or compensated appropriately. The conference room walls displayed timeline charts that documented the chronological development of pharmaceutical innovations from initial graduate research through commercial licensing agreements with major healthcare corporations. The visual presentation would support courtroom testimony by establishing clear progression from independent academic work to revenue-generating therapeutic applications, demonstrating that breakthrough developments predated marriage and family business involvement. Richard's morning routine remained unchanged as he prepared for business meetings with pharmaceutical industry partners, who generated licensing revenues through my innovations, while remaining unaware of my role as primary inventor. His calendar included investor presentations that would discuss competitive advantages and market positioning based on therapeutic developments he could neither explain nor replicate without technical assistance from sources he had never identified. The secure communication system enabled encrypted correspondence with pharmaceutical corporation executives who had been providing sworn affidavits acknowledging my scientific contributions to therapeutic development projects. Their professional testimony established industry recognition that contradicted family narratives about collaborative achievement or shared innovation within established business relationships, creating legal foundation for intellectual property ownership claims. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez had submitted expert witness testimony that detailed standard practices for pharmaceutical patent attribution and revenue distribution within academic research environments. Her professional analysis would support claims that systematic credit appropriation represented deviation from industry ethical standards rather than normal collaborative development within family business structures, establishing baseline expectations for appropriate recognition and financial compensation. The laboratory space beneath our penthouse had been equipped with molecular analysis equipment that enabled independent verification of pharmaceutical formulations, ensuring that ongoing research capabilities remained protected from family business interference. The facility operated under Elena Vasquez Biochemical Innovations corporate structure, maintaining complete separation from Blackstone family operations while supporting continued therapeutic development and patent applications. The morning conference call with Dr. Sarah Kim, Director of Pharmaceutical Research at Princeton University Medical Center, confirmed collaborative agreements that would ensure continued access to clinical trial facilities and regulatory approval processes regardless of divorce settlement outcomes. The academic partnerships represented professional network based on scientific merit rather than family connections, providing foundation for independent pharmaceutical innovation. My smartphone contained recorded conversations with pharmaceutical industry consultants who had been documenting market valuations for therapeutic patents, establishing commercial worth that exceeded family asset portfolios through independent professional assessment. The audio evidence would support financial claims by demonstrating objective market recognition of intellectual property value, rather than subjective family interpretation of contribution significance. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had been contacted regarding potential corporate fraud involving systematic misrepresentation of intellectual property ownership in pharmaceutical industry filings and regulatory submissions. Their preliminary investigation focused on documentation discrepancies between patent records and corporate marketing materials that attributed scientific achievements to individuals who lacked technical credentials to create breakthrough therapeutics. Elena Vasquez Biochemical Innovations had secured intellectual property insurance policies that protected future pharmaceutical innovations from potential appropriation attempts, ensuring that ongoing research would receive appropriate legal protection and financial recognition. The coverage included provisions for litigation support and expert witness testimony in disputes involving patent ownership or revenue attribution within complex family business relationships. The morning preparation included review of courtroom presentation materials that would establish my scientific credentials through academic transcripts, professional publications, and peer-reviewed documentation from major biochemical journals. The visual evidence would demonstrate expertise and achievement that contradicted family assumptions about educational background or professional capability, supporting claims for comprehensive recognition and financial restitution. Dr. Martinez explained legal strategies that balanced comprehensive asset recovery with protection of ongoing pharmaceutical research partnerships, ensuring that divorce proceedings would not compromise future innovation opportunities or professional relationships within academic and commercial research communities. The litigation approach prioritized long-term strategic outcomes rather than immediate financial settlements that might limit continued scientific productivity. The secure vault contained original laboratory notebooks that documented experimental protocols and theoretical frameworks informing pharmaceutical development processes. Handwritten evidence that proved conceptual foundations for therapeutic innovations had been established through independent academic work rather than collaborative family business development. The chronological documentation would support intellectual property ownership claims during complex litigation proceedings. Richard's pharmaceutical industry publications remained stacked on his desk, business analysis that discussed market trends and competitive positioning without connecting reported developments to innovations created by the woman who prepared his morning coffee. His genuine intellectual interest in healthcare business strategies demonstrated capability that remained systematically separated from recognition of scientific achievements, enabling his continued prosperity and professional credibility. The financial planning session with estate management specialists had established trust fund structures that would protect pharmaceutical patent revenues from potential future appropriation attempts, ensuring that intellectual property income would remain under my exclusive control regardless of personal relationship developments or family business interference. The legal arrangements included provisions for charitable giving that would honor my grandmother Sofia Vasquez's legacy of scientific innovation. The morning routine concluded with strategic review of media management protocols that would ensure appropriate recognition for pharmaceutical achievements while minimizing potential damage to ongoing research partnerships or academic collaborations. The public relations approach balanced comprehensive truth disclosure with protection of professional relationships that supported continued therapeutic development and patent applications. Margaret Chen presented documentation strategies that would establish intellectual property ownership through multiple corroborating evidence sources, creating unassailable legal foundation for financial claims that reflected authentic market value for pharmaceutical innovations. The comprehensive approach included academic records, patent filings, regulatory approvals, licensing agreements, and industry recognition that collectively demonstrated systematic appropriation disguised as family business success. The pharmaceutical corporation partnerships had been restructured to ensure direct licensing relationships that bypassed Blackstone family involvement while maintaining commercial viability for therapeutic applications. The new agreements included provisions for expanded research collaboration and accelerated development timelines that would establish additional patent protection while demonstrating continued innovation capability independent of family business resources. Dr. Rodriguez forwarded additional expert testimony that compared my pharmaceutical achievements to industry benchmarks for scientific contribution and intellectual property development, establishing objective standards for appropriate recognition and financial compensation. Her professional analysis would support courtroom arguments by providing contextual framework for evaluating systematic credit appropriation within pharmaceutical research environments. The morning preparation phase had established comprehensive legal foundation for divorce proceedings that would address substantive intellectual property issues rather than superficial asset division, ensuring that pharmaceutical achievements would receive appropriate recognition and financial compensation regardless of family relationship outcomes. The mathematical precision underlying evidence compilation reflected scientific training applied to strategic legal planning. The transformation from underestimated family member to empowered pharmaceutical entrepreneur required 18 months of systematic preparation that combined legal expertise with scientific documentation and financial analysis. The comprehensive approach ensured that divorce settlement would restore proper attribution for innovations, while providing foundation for continued independent research and therapeutic development. The weight of evidence supporting intellectual property claims had been processed through months of legal consultation and strategic planning that enabled methodical response to systematic exploitation based on documented proof rather than emotional reaction to family social engineering. The litigation strategy prioritized objective truth over subjective interpretation, ensuring mathematical certainty would overcome manufactured narratives about collaborative achievement or inherited business success. The preparation phase demonstrated that authentic scientific expertise, when properly documented and legally protected, creates foundation for demanding appropriate recognition and financial compensation, regardless of established power structures or family relationship dynamics. The strategic approach would prove that genuine innovation ultimately overcomes administrative competence when intellectual property documentation confronts systematic credit appropriation disguised as generous social acceptance. The boardroom at Blackstone Pharmaceuticals reflected corporate success through mahogany paneling and leather appointments that had been purchased with licensing revenues from autoimmune therapeutics I had developed during graduate research, though the quarterly meeting participants remained unaware of intellectual property sources underlying their quarterly profit discussions. Richard occupied the head position at the conference table with confidence built on assumptions about inherited business acumen rather than recognition of systematic appropriation that enabled his continued authority within pharmaceutical industry circles. Victoria Blackstone reviewed financial statements that documented steady revenue growth from therapeutic licensing agreements with major healthcare corporations, her maternal pride and family business achievements reflecting genuine satisfaction with commercial success, while remaining completely ignorant about molecular engineering innovations that generated their prosperity. Her commentary about strategic planning and market positioning demonstrated competent business analysis applied to intellectual property portfolios she had never created or contributed to through actual scientific work. The morning presentation included competitive analysis that positioned Blackstone Pharmaceuticals advantageously within autoimmune therapeutic markets, through proprietary formulations that required biochemical expertise exceeding collective family knowledge. Richard delivered technical explanations with practiced confidence, his terminology learned through repeated coaching sessions that had transformed complex molecular mechanisms into simplified business concepts suitable for investor presentations and regulatory discussions. Caroline Blackstone Wells attended the quarterly meeting with notebook containing strategic recommendations for pharmaceutical market expansion. Her Harvard MBA credentials applied to business development that depended entirely on therapeutic innovations she could neither replicate nor explain to scientific peers, who evaluated commercial claims based on molecular evidence rather than corporate relationships. Her professional competence remained limited to administrative functions rather than creative or technical achievements. The PowerPoint presentation displayed market penetration statistics for 3 autoimmune therapeutics that generated $127 million annually through licensing partnerships, commercial success that was attributed to family business vision rather than scientific breakthrough achieved through years of independent academic research. The disconnect between public recognition and actual innovation reflected systematic credit appropriation that had been normalized through 5 years of family social engineering. Michael Blackstone discussed regulatory compliance requirements and patent protection strategies with genuine expertise in intellectual property management, his financial acumen enabling effective administration of pharmaceutical assets without corresponding understanding of biochemical research methods or therapeutic development processes that created the innovations he supervised through traditional business practices. His contributions represented legitimate administrative competence rather than scientific achievement. The quarterly revenue reports documented consistent growth patterns that supported lifestyle maintenance and charitable giving activities, financial prosperity that family members associated with inherited business advantages, rather than ongoing innovation that required continuous research and development investment to maintain competitive positioning within rapidly evolving pharmaceutical markets. Their economic confidence reflected systematic ignorance about intellectual property dependencies. Richard's discussion of upcoming pharmaceutical industry conferences included speaking engagements where he would present breakthrough therapeutic developments to audiences of healthcare professionals and research scientists. His presentations scheduled to discuss innovations he had never understood or contributed to through actual laboratory work. The professional recognition enhanced his reputation within industry circles that evaluated pharmaceutical claims based on technical merit rather than family connections. The morning meeting proceeded through standard agenda items including research budget allocations, marketing strategy discussions, and partnership negotiations with healthcare organizations, business activities that generated legitimate commercial value through competent administration of intellectual property resources while remaining completely separated from recognition of innovation sources. Their operational effectiveness represented genuine management capability applied to appropriated achievements. Victoria's comments about family pharmaceutical legacy included references to generational contributions to healthcare advancement. Her narrative positioning current success as continuation of inherited business traditions, rather than recent breakthrough developments that required scientific expertise exceeding family educational backgrounds. The historical framework enabled comfortable interpretation of present achievements that avoided uncomfortable questions about actual intellectual property sources. The conference call, with pharmaceutical industry consultants focused on market expansion opportunities and competitive positioning strategies. Professional advice that assumed family members possessed technical knowledge to evaluate therapeutic applications and development potential. The external advisors remained unaware that their strategic recommendations were being received by individuals who lacked scientific credentials to create or modify the pharmaceutical innovations under discussion. Caroline reviewed marketing materials that highlighted breakthrough therapeutic benefits for autoimmune disorder treatment, promotional content that emphasized patient outcomes and clinical effectiveness without acknowledging scientific innovations underlying therapeutic mechanisms. The marketing strategy demonstrated competent business communication applied to medical applications while maintaining systematic separation from recognition of research sources and intellectual property development. The quarterly meeting concluded with strategic planning discussions about pharmaceutical research investments and partnership expansion, family decisions about resource allocation that affected ongoing therapeutic development without requiring understanding of molecular biology principles or biochemical engineering processes. Their administrative authority enabled continued commercial success through management of intellectual property portfolios they had neither created nor comprehended. Richard's afternoon schedule included investor meetings that would discuss pharmaceutical market advantages and growth projections based on proprietary therapeutic formulations, His business presentations, supported by financial documentation that established commercial viability without requiring technical explanations about molecular mechanisms or therapeutic development processes. The investor relations maintained corporate credibility through carefully managed information disclosure. The Blackstone family office received updated patent valuation reports from intellectual property assessment firms that calculated market worth for therapeutic innovations, mathematical analyses that established commercial value for pharmaceutical assets while obscuring connection between scientific achievement and family business prosperity. The professional evaluations supported continued wealth management without acknowledging innovation sources or intellectual property development. Michael's financial planning discussions included trust fund management and estate planning strategies that preserved family wealth through diversified investment portfolios. His expertise enabling effective asset protection and growth optimization without requiring recognition of pharmaceutical patent dependencies. The financial sophistication demonstrated genuine professional capability applied to inherited resources rather than created achievements. The pharmaceutical industry publications contained analyses of competitive markets and therapeutic development trends that discussed breakthrough autoimmune treatments without connecting reported innovations to specific research sources or patent ownership structures. The technical discussions remained accessible to business audiences while avoiding detailed scientific explanations that might reveal intellectual property attribution or innovation development processes. Victoria's charitable foundation activities included substantial donations to medical research organizations that advanced autoimmune therapeutic development. Her philanthropic generosity funded by appropriated pharmaceutical revenues while supporting scientific advancement that she could neither understand nor evaluate for technical merit. The foundation work demonstrated authentic commitment to healthcare improvement through financial resources derived from intellectual property appropriation. The afternoon conference calls with healthcare industry partners focused on licensing agreement modifications and partnership expansion opportunities. Business negotiations that generated additional revenue streams through my pharmaceutical innovations, while maintaining systematic exclusion of recognition or financial attribution for scientific contributions. The commercial relationships established legitimate business value through competent negotiation of intellectual property licensing terms. Richard's evening routine included review of pharmaceutical industry trade publications that contained technical articles about autoimmune therapeutic mechanisms, his reading list reflecting genuine intellectual curiosity about healthcare developments, while remaining completely separated from understanding that his wife had created the molecular engineering innovations discussed in professional literature he studied for business insight. The family dinner conversation included discussion of upcoming pharmaceutical industry award ceremony where Richard would receive recognition for contributions to autoimmune therapeutic development, professional honors that acknowledged business achievement while systematically excluding scientific innovation sources. The industry recognition enhanced family reputation through carefully managed public relations that obscured intellectual property appropriation. Caroline's museum board responsibilities included oversight of science education initiatives that promoted biochemical research and pharmaceutical innovation. Her cultural leadership connecting family philanthropy to educational advancement in fields directly benefiting from therapeutic developments she could neither understand nor replicate. The nonprofit work demonstrated authentic commitment to scientific advancement through administrative competence rather than technical expertise. The evening preparation included review of family social calendar containing charity galas and cultural events that would provide opportunities for networking within pharmaceutical industry circles, social activities that enhanced business relationships, while maintaining comfortable distance from technical discussions that might reveal intellectual property sources or scientific contribution attribution. The cultural engagement supported business objectives through established social protocols. The systematic performance of inherited business authority continued through established routines that maintained family prosperity and professional reputation, while remaining completely dependent on intellectual property innovations the performers could neither explain nor replicate. Their competent administration of appropriated achievements represented genuine management capability applied to systematic credit appropriation disguised as inherited business acumen and collaborative family enterprise success. The Manhattan Family Court building stood as a monument to legal resolution, its limestone facade reflecting morning sunlight across Worth Street as black sedans discharged passengers who would witness the systematic dismantling of assumptions that had governed Blackstone family dynamics for 5 years. The courthouse steps provided natural amphitheater seating for pharmaceutical industry observers, legal professionals, and financial journalists who had gathered to document what they expected would be routine divorce proceedings between Connecticut pharmaceutical executive and his middle-class wife. Richard emerged from his limousine with confidence that reflected his complete ignorance about documentation that would be presented during morning session, his designer suit and practiced courtroom demeanor, suggesting preparation for legal formalities rather than intellectual property litigation involving systematic appropriation of pharmaceutical innovations. Victoria Blackstone accompanied her son with maternal authority that would be fundamentally challenged by evidence establishing her daughter-in-law as primary source of wealth she had attributed to inherited business acumen. The courtroom gallery filled with pharmaceutical industry representatives who had traveled from Boston, Princeton, and Research Triangle Park to observe proceedings that would establish precedent for intellectual property disputes involving family business relationships and disputed patent ownership. Their presence indicated recognition that morning testimony would address substantive issues affecting pharmaceutical innovation attribution and revenue distribution practices throughout the healthcare industry. Caroline Blackstone Wells occupied front-row seating with notebook, prepared to document legal arguments that would challenge everything she understood about family business success, her Harvard MBA credentials providing framework for analyzing complex asset division, while remaining completely unprepared for revelations about intellectual property sources underlying Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' prosperity. Her professional competence would be tested by evidence that contradicted fundamental assumptions about collaborative family enterprise development. The Honorable Judge Patricia Williams possessed extensive experience in complex intellectual property litigation, her judicial expertise particularly relevant to disputes involving pharmaceutical patents and corporate ownership structures that obscured innovation sources through systematic credit appropriation. The courtroom procedures would be conducted with mathematical precision that prioritized documented evidence over emotional appeals or family relationship considerations. Dr. Jennifer Martinez approached the plaintiff table with leather briefcase containing forensic accounting reports, patent documentation, and expert witness testimony that would establish comprehensive legal foundation for intellectual property claims exceeding $84 million in disputed assets. Her confident bearing reflected months of preparation involving multiple legal specialties and professional consultation that had created unassailable documentation supporting pharmaceutical innovation ownership and appropriate financial compensation. The morning session commenced with opening statements that outlined systematic appropriation of biochemical innovations through corporate structures designed to transfer recognition and revenue from scientific achievement to administrative management, legal presentation that would challenge established narratives about Blackstone family pharmaceutical success. The mathematical precision underlying evidence compilation reflected scientific training applied to strategic legal planning that prioritized objective truth over subjective interpretation. Richard's legal representation had prepared defense arguments based on assumptions about collaborative family business development and shared asset accumulation through marriage, their strategy reflecting complete ignorance about independent intellectual property creation that predated family relationships and established autonomous financial resources through direct commercial licensing agreements. The defense preparation would prove inadequate when confronted with comprehensive documentation that established scientific innovation sources. Margaret Chen presented expert testimony regarding standard pharmaceutical industry practices for patent attribution and revenue distribution, her professional analysis establishing baseline expectations for appropriate recognition and financial compensation that had been systematically violated through Blackstone family business operations. The academic foundation underlying her testimony would support claims that systematic credit appropriation represented deviation from industry ethical standards rather than normal collaborative development. The first major revelation occurred when Dr. Martinez introduced patent application number 7/934/228 for targeted autoimmune therapeutic delivery systems, documentation establishing my exclusive ownership of molecular engineering processes that generated $47 million annually through licensing agreements with major healthcare corporations. The technical specifications contained biochemical formulations that required expertise exceeding collective knowledge of all Blackstone family members, proving innovative foundations originated from sources they had never acknowledged or compensated appropriately. Victoria Blackstone's expression shifted from confident authority to visible confusion as patent documentation was presented to the court. Her maternal certainty about family business achievements challenged by mathematical evidence that contradicted 5 years of assumptions about inherited wealth sources and collaborative enterprise development. The cognitive dissonance created by objective legal evidence began undermining social narratives that had positioned her son as pharmaceutical industry leader rather than administrative manager of appropriated innovations. The courtroom atmosphere transformed as pharmaceutical industry observers recognized implications of intellectual property documentation being presented, their professional understanding of patent law and innovation attribution, enabling immediate recognition that testimony addressed systematic appropriation disguised as family business collaboration. The legal proceedings had evolved from routine divorce settlement into landmark intellectual property dispute, with industry-wide ramifications for pharmaceutical innovation recognition and revenue distribution practices. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez provided expert witness testimony comparing my pharmaceutical achievements to industry benchmarks for scientific contribution and intellectual property development, her professional analysis establishing objective standards that demonstrated systematic undervaluation and credit appropriation within family business structures. The academic credibility underlying her testimony created legal foundation for substantial compensatory damage claims that reflected authentic market value for therapeutic innovations. Richard's confidence began deteriorating as Federal Drug Administration approval letters were introduced as evidence, regulatory documentation that established government recognition of my scientific contributions to autoimmune therapeutic development through official approval processes that evaluated molecular mechanisms rather than corporate relationships or family business connections. The federal acknowledgement provided unassailable proof of innovation ownership that transcended family social engineering or manufactured business narratives. Caroline Blackstone Wells attempted to maintain composure. As licensing agreements with pharmaceutical corporations were presented to the court, commercial documentation that established direct business relationships between my independent research company and major healthcare organizations that generated revenue streams completely separate from Blackstone family operations. Her business education enabled understanding of contractual implications while revealing systematic exclusion from profitable pharmaceutical partnerships she had never known existed. The mathematical precision of forensic accounting reports established systematic patterns of lifestyle expenses funded by appropriated pharmaceutical revenues, financial analysis that documented luxury purchases, charitable donations, and investment activities that had been supported by intellectual property innovations attributed to family business acumen rather than scientific achievement. The accounting evidence created comprehensive framework for calculating appropriate compensatory damages and asset reallocation. Michael Blackstone's expression reflected growing recognition that family financial security depended entirely on intellectual property resources controlled by someone they had systematically underestimated. His expertise in trust fund management suddenly appearing inadequate when applied to assets that required ongoing scientific innovation rather than traditional investment strategies. The realization that administrative competence could not generate pharmaceutical breakthrough developments challenged fundamental assumptions about family business sustainability. The courtroom presentation included clinical trial data and peer-reviewed documentation from major biochemical journals that established academic recognition of my therapeutic innovations, professional validation that demonstrated scientific credibility within research communities, that evaluated pharmaceutical claims based on molecular evidence rather than corporate marketing or family business reputation. The peer review process provided objective confirmation of intellectual achievements that transcended family social engineering. Dr. Martinez introduced recorded conversations with pharmaceutical industry executives who explicitly acknowledged my role as primary innovator for therapeutic developments that generated ongoing commercial success, audio evidence that established professional recognition, contradicting family narratives about collaborative achievement or shared innovation within established business relationships. The recorded testimony created legal foundation for intellectual property ownership claims that could not be challenged through family relationship dynamics. The revelation that Elena Vasquez's biochemical innovations had been operating independently for 18 months while generating substantial pharmaceutical licensing revenues shocked family members who had remained completely unaware of business activities that demonstrated continued innovation capability and professional recognition. The corporate documentation established comprehensive autonomy from Blackstone family business operations, while maintaining commercial viability for therapeutic applications and research partnerships. Victoria Blackstone's realization that charitable foundation activities had been funded through appropriated pharmaceutical revenues created visible emotional distress, her philanthropic identity challenged by recognition that generous donations to medical research organizations represented systematic redistribution of wealth generated by innovations she had neither understood nor acknowledged. The mathematical evidence transformed charitable giving from altruistic achievement into inadvertent money laundering of intellectual property appropriation. The courtroom proceedings established legal precedent for intellectual property litigation involving family business relationships and systematic credit appropriation, judicial recognition that would influence pharmaceutical industry practices regarding innovation, attribution, and revenue distribution between scientific achievement and administrative management. The legal framework created comprehensive protection for future researchers whose contributions might be systematically appropriated through family business structures or corporate ownership manipulation. Richard's legal team requested recess to review documentation that had fundamentally altered their understanding of asset division requirements, their defense strategy completely undermined by evidence establishing independent intellectual property ownership, and substantial financial resources that exceeded assumptions about middle-class background and economic dependence on family marriage relationships. The comprehensive legal preparation had created mathematical certainty that would determine divorce settlement outcomes through documented proof rather than negotiated compromise. The courthouse recess provided 20 minutes for the Blackstone family to process revelations that had fundamentally altered their understanding of wealth sources, intellectual property ownership, and the woman they had spent 5 years treating as a fortunate beneficiary of their social acceptance. The marble corridors echoed with urgent whispered conversations as pharmaceutical industry observers discussed implications of evidence that established new precedents for innovation attribution and family business asset division within complex intellectual property disputes. Richard stood near the courthouse windows, reviewing patent documentation with his legal team, their emergency consultation revealing the comprehensive scope of scientific achievements that had been systematically attributed to family business acumen rather than individual innovation. His attorney explained intellectual property law principles that established exclusive ownership rights for pharmaceutical patents, legal concepts that contradicted every assumption underlying his confidence about shared marital assets and collaborative family enterprise development. Victoria Blackstone occupied a wooden bench while attempting to reconcile mathematical evidence with 5 years of social narratives that had positioned Elena as grateful recipient of generous family acceptance, the cognitive dissonance creating visible emotional distress as she recognized systematic patterns of intellectual appropriation disguised as charitable inclusion. Her maternal authority had been built on assumptions about inherited business advantages that were being systematically dismantled through objective legal documentation. The pharmaceutical industry representatives used recess time to review scientific publications and patent databases that confirmed Elena Vasquez as primary inventor for autoimmune therapeutic innovations, their professional verification establishing comprehensive recognition within research communities that evaluated pharmaceutical claims based on molecular evidence rather than corporate marketing or family business reputation. The academic credibility surrounding her achievements exceeded collective recognition of all Blackstone family members within healthcare innovation circles. Caroline Blackstone Wells placed urgent phone calls to financial advisors and estate planning attorneys, while attempting to understand implications of asset revelations that would require fundamental restructuring of family investment portfolios and trust fund management strategies. Her Harvard MBA education provided analytical framework for calculating financial exposure and legal liability, though her business training had not prepared her for intellectual property disputes involving systematic appropriation of pharmaceutical innovations. The courthouse press area filled with reporters from pharmaceutical industry publications and legal journals who recognized that morning testimony addressed substantive issues affecting healthcare innovation practices throughout the industry. Their coverage would influence professional standards for patent attribution and revenue distribution between scientific achievement and administrative management, creating comprehensive framework for protecting future researchers whose contributions might be systematically appropriated through family business structures. Michael Blackstone consulted with forensic accountants who explained financial implications of intellectual property reallocation, their analysis revealing potential tax obligations and estate planning complications that would require comprehensive restructuring of family wealth management strategies. His expertise in traditional investment approaches appeared inadequate when applied to assets that required ongoing scientific innovation rather than conventional portfolio administration and trust fund distribution protocols. The courthouse security personnel managed increasing media attention as pharmaceutical industry analysts and legal professionals recognized implications of evidence being presented, their professional understanding, enabling immediate recognition that proceedings addressed landmark intellectual property dispute with industry-wide ramifications. The legal framework being established would influence future litigation involving innovation attribution and systematic credit appropriation within family business relationships and corporate ownership structures. Dr. Jennifer Martinez used recess time to review additional documentation that would be presented during afternoon session, her comprehensive preparation ensuring systematic presentation of evidence that established mathematical certainty about intellectual property ownership and appropriate financial compensation. The legal strategy balanced thorough documentation with efficient presentation that would prevent prolonged litigation while ensuring complete asset recovery and recognition restoration. The courthouse telephone system experienced unprecedented usage as Blackstone family members attempted to contact business advisors, estate planners, and crisis management consultants, who might provide strategic guidance for addressing revelations that had transformed routine divorce proceedings into comprehensive intellectual property litigation. Their desperate consultation revealed complete unpreparedness for legal challenges that questioned fundamental assumptions about wealth sources and family business legitimacy. Richard's pharmaceutical industry colleagues began arriving at the courthouse as word spread about testimony that addressed systematic appropriation of biochemical innovations, their presence indicating professional recognition that proceedings would establish precedents affecting healthcare research attribution and commercial revenue distribution practices. The industry attention transformed family legal matters into professional reputation management crisis that would influence future business relationships and partnership opportunities. The courthouse corridor conversations revealed growing recognition among pharmaceutical professionals that Elena Vasquez possessed scientific credentials and innovation achievements that exceeded assumptions based on her social positioning within Blackstone family dynamics. Their belated acknowledgement reflected industry patterns of systematic undervaluation for female scientists whose contributions had been attributed to male colleagues or corporate administrators through carefully constructed collaborative development narratives. Victoria's phone conversations with charitable foundation board members revealed additional complications as nonprofit organizations discovered that substantial donations supporting medical research had been funded through appropriated intellectual property revenues rather than inherited family wealth. The foundation directors required immediate clarification about donation sources and legal standing, their concerns reflecting potential regulatory scrutiny and public relations challenges that could affect ongoing philanthropic operations. The courthouse media briefing area attracted attention from business journalists and pharmaceutical industry analysts, who recognized that morning testimony addressed substantive legal issues with implications extending beyond individual family dynamics. Their coverage would influence professional practices regarding innovation recognition and establish comprehensive framework for addressing systematic credit appropriation within healthcare research and development environments. Caroline's emergency consultations with museum board colleagues and cultural organization administrators revealed additional reputational complications as professional associations discovered that family philanthropic activities had been supported through appropriated pharmaceutical revenues rather than authentic inherited prosperity. The cultural institutions required immediate clarification about funding sources and legal standing, their concerns reflecting potential governance issues and public accountability questions. The courthouse cafeteria became informal meeting space for pharmaceutical industry representatives who discussed implications of intellectual property evidence being presented, their professional analysis confirming that Elena Vasquez's achievements represented genuine scientific breakthrough rather than collaborative family enterprise development. The industry recognition provided additional validation for legal claims while establishing professional credibility that transcended family relationship dynamics and social positioning strategies. Michael's urgent meetings with investment advisors and wealth management professionals revealed comprehensive financial exposure as systematic appropriation of intellectual property was documented through forensic accounting and legal proceedings. Their analysis indicated potential asset forfeiture requirements and tax obligation adjustments that would fundamentally alter family financial planning and estate management strategies, requiring immediate restructuring of trust fund operations and investment portfolio allocations. The courthouse security briefing addressed media management protocols as pharmaceutical industry coverage attracted attention from business publications and legal journals that recognized landmark intellectual property litigation with industry-wide implications. The proceedings had evolved beyond individual family dynamics into professional precedent establishment that would influence future disputes involving innovation attribution and systematic credit appropriation within complex family business relationships. Richard's legal team received additional expert testimony from pharmaceutical industry professionals who confirmed Elena's scientific achievements and innovation ownership through independent professional verification. Their analysis establishing comprehensive foundation for intellectual property claims that could not be challenged through family relationship dynamics or manufactured collaborative development narratives. The professional validation created mathematical certainty about asset division requirements and appropriate financial compensation. The courthouse preparation area accommodated increasing numbers of legal professionals and pharmaceutical industry experts who recognized that afternoon session would address substantive issues affecting healthcare innovation practices and intellectual property protection throughout the research community. Their attendance indicated recognition that proceedings established comprehensive framework for addressing systematic appropriation and ensuring appropriate attribution for scientific achievements within complex family business environments. Victoria's recognition that lifestyle maintenance had depended entirely on appropriated pharmaceutical revenues created fundamental identity crisis, as charitable activities and cultural leadership positions had been supported through systematic intellectual property exploitation rather than inherited family advantages. Her social positioning within Connecticut communities would require comprehensive reassessment based on mathematical evidence that contradicted assumptions underlying 5 years of generous family acceptance narratives. The courthouse proceedings had established legal foundation for intellectual property reallocation that would ensure appropriate recognition and financial compensation while creating precedent for protecting future pharmaceutical researchers whose contributions might be systematically appropriated through family business structures or corporate ownership manipulation. The comprehensive documentation approach had created mathematical certainty that would determine settlement outcomes through objective evidence rather than negotiated compromise or emotional appeals. The afternoon session commenced with presentation of comprehensive documentation that would establish the mathematical foundations underlying Elena Vasquez's biochemical innovations, revealing intellectual property portfolios that exceeded the collective pharmaceutical achievements of the Blackstone family business operations through decades of systematic appropriation. Judge Patricia Williams reviewed evidence compilation that demonstrated scientific expertise and innovation development spanning 8 years of independent research, creating legal framework that prioritized documented achievement over inherited business positioning. Dr. Margaret Chen approached the witness stand with credentials that included 23 years of pharmaceutical patent law experience and specialization in intellectual property disputes involving complex family business relationships. Her testimony would provide professional context for evaluating systematic credit appropriation within healthcare innovation environments, establishing industry standards that had been violated through Blackstone family business practices that attributed scientific breakthrough developments to administrative management rather than actual research achievement. The courtroom presentation included molecular engineering diagrams that illustrated biochemical processes underlying autoimmune therapeutic formulations, technical specifications that required advanced chemistry knowledge and pharmaceutical manufacturing expertise exceeding the educational backgrounds of all family members who had claimed credit for innovation development. The visual evidence demonstrated complexity levels that could not be mastered through business administration or inherited family connections, but demanded specialized scientific training and years of dedicated research experience. Elena Vasquez's patent portfolio contained 12 separate intellectual property filings that had been approved through rigorous Federal Drug Administration regulatory processes, each application requiring comprehensive clinical trial data and safety documentation that established therapeutic effectiveness through scientific methodology rather than marketing claims or corporate positioning strategies. The regulatory approval process had evaluated molecular mechanisms and clinical outcomes through independent professional review that validated innovation achievement based on objective medical evidence. The licensing agreements with major pharmaceutical corporations included technical specifications and manufacturing protocols that had been developed through Elena's independent research activities, commercial contracts that established direct business relationships bypassing Blackstone family involvement, while generating substantial revenue streams through authentic intellectual property ownership. The contractual documentation revealed sophisticated pharmaceutical industry partnerships that required scientific expertise and innovation capability rather than inherited business connections or administrative competence. Dr. Chen explained standard pharmaceutical industry practices for patent attribution and revenue distribution, professional analysis that established baseline expectations for appropriate recognition and financial compensation within healthcare research environments. Her testimony revealed that systematic credit appropriation represented significant deviation from ethical standards throughout the pharmaceutical industry, where innovation ownership was typically attributed to actual researchers rather than corporate administrators or family business managers, who lacked technical expertise to create breakthrough therapeutic developments. The Federal Bureau of Investigation documentation included preliminary findings from ongoing investigation into potential corporate fraud involving misrepresentation of intellectual property ownership in pharmaceutical regulatory filings and industry publications. The federal inquiry focused on systematic patterns of false attribution that had been used to support corporate marketing claims and business development activities, while obscuring actual innovation sources and scientific contribution recognition within complex family business structures. Richard Blackstone's deposition testimony revealed complete inability to explain molecular mechanisms underlying autoimmune therapeutic formulations that had generated substantial pharmaceutical industry recognition and commercial success. His recorded statements demonstrated fundamental ignorance about biochemical processes, regulatory compliance requirements, and scientific methodology that had been essential for therapeutic development and patent approval through rigorous federal oversight procedures that evaluated innovation merit rather than corporate presentation or family business reputation. The courtroom evidence included peer-reviewed publications from major biochemical research journals that had cited Elena's pharmaceutical innovations in theoretical frameworks for advanced therapeutic development, academic recognition that established scientific credibility within professional research communities that evaluated contribution significance based on technical merit rather than social positioning or family relationship dynamics. The peer review process provided independent professional validation that transcended corporate marketing or manufactured collaborative development narratives. Victoria Blackstone's recorded conversations revealed systematic patterns of social engineering, designed to minimize recognition of Elena's scientific achievements, while attributing pharmaceutical industry success to inherited family business advantages and collaborative enterprise development. The audio evidence documented deliberate narrative construction that had positioned Elena as fortunate beneficiary of generous family acceptance, rather than primary innovator whose intellectual property generated wealth that supported Blackstone family lifestyle and charitable activities. The pharmaceutical industry expert testimony included market valuation analysis that established Elena's intellectual property portfolio worth at $84.7 million through independent professional assessment conducted by recognized healthcare investment specialists. The mathematical calculations considered ongoing revenue streams, patent protection duration, market penetration potential, and competitive advantages that reflected authentic commercial value for therapeutic innovations, rather than speculative corporate projections or family business promotional claims. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez presented comparative analysis that positioned Elena's pharmaceutical achievements within industry benchmarks for scientific contribution and intellectual property development, professional evaluation that demonstrated exceptional innovation capability, exceeding standard expectations for individual researchers within competitive healthcare environments. Her academic analysis established objective framework for recognizing genuine breakthrough achievement rather than collaborative family enterprise development, or inherited business success. The forensic accounting reports revealed systematic diversion of pharmaceutical licensing revenues through Blackstone family corporate structures that had been designed to obscure direct connection between Elena's scientific innovations and lifestyle expenses, including luxury purchases, charitable donations, and investment activities. The financial analysis documented comprehensive patterns of intellectual property appropriation that had been disguised through legitimate business operations and estate management practices. Caroline Blackstone Wells' deposition included admission that her museum board appointments and cultural organization leadership positions had been supported through charitable donations funded by appropriated pharmaceutical revenues rather than inherited family wealth or personal professional achievement. Her recorded testimony revealed systematic dependency on intellectual property income that had never been acknowledged or attributed to actual innovation sources within family business narratives. The clinical trial documentation established Elena's direct involvement in therapeutic testing procedures and regulatory compliance activities that had been essential for federal drug approval processes, scientific work that required specialized knowledge and hands-on research experience, rather than administrative oversight or business development coordination. The medical evidence demonstrated personal expertise in pharmaceutical development that exceeded collective family knowledge about healthcare innovation and regulatory requirements. Michael Blackstone's financial records revealed trust fund management activities that had been entirely dependent on ongoing pharmaceutical patent royalties generated through Elena's intellectual property licensing agreements. Investment strategies that would become unsustainable without continued access to innovation-based revenue streams. His expertise in traditional wealth preservation appeared inadequate when applied to assets requiring ongoing scientific research and therapeutic development rather than conventional portfolio administration. The pharmaceutical corporation executives provided sworn testimony acknowledging Elena's role as primary innovator for therapeutic developments that had generated substantial commercial success and industry recognition, professional statements that established direct business relationships, and technical collaboration that had bypassed Blackstone family involvement. Their industry testimony created comprehensive foundation for intellectual property ownership claims that could not be challenged through family relationship dynamics or manufactured collaborative narratives. The molecular modeling software and laboratory equipment inventories revealed sophisticated research capabilities that had been established through Elena Vasquez Biochemical Innovations, independent scientific infrastructure that enabled continued pharmaceutical innovation while maintaining complete separation from Blackstone family business operations. The technical resources demonstrated ongoing capability for breakthrough therapeutic development that would ensure future financial independence regardless of divorce settlement outcomes. Judge Williams reviewed comprehensive evidence compilation that established mathematical certainty about intellectual property ownership through multiple corroborating documentation sources including academic records, patent filings, regulatory approvals, licensing agreements, industry recognition, and professional testimony. The legal framework prioritized objective proof over subjective interpretation, ensuring that pharmaceutical achievements would receive appropriate recognition and financial compensation based on documented contribution rather than family relationship considerations. The testimony phase concluded with presentation of Elena Vasquez research pipeline documentation that revealed ongoing pharmaceutical innovation activities, including 3 promising therapeutic compounds currently undergoing clinical testing for autoimmune disorder treatment. The future development potential demonstrated continued scientific capability and commercial viability that would establish additional patent protection while ensuring sustainable financial independence through authentic intellectual property creation rather than inherited business advantages. The courtroom proceedings had established comprehensive legal foundation for asset reallocation that reflected mathematical reality about pharmaceutical innovation ownership, while creating precedent for protecting future researchers whose contributions might be systematically appropriated through family business structures or corporate ownership manipulation. The evidence compilation approach had eliminated subjective interpretation while ensuring objective recognition of scientific achievement that exceeded administrative competence through documented proof, rather than emotional appeals or family relationship dynamics. The pharmaceutical industry regulatory framework operated according to scientific principles that prioritized molecular evidence over corporate relationships. federal oversight mechanisms that responded to intellectual property documentation through established legal protocols, rather than family business narratives or social positioning strategies. The Drug Administration Compliance Division initiated comprehensive review of Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' licensing agreements and patent attribution practices, regulatory scrutiny that would establish industry precedent for innovation recognition and appropriate financial compensation within complex family business environments. Judge Patricia Williams rendered preliminary ruling that established Elena Vasquez as legitimate owner of pharmaceutical patents generating $127 million annually through licensing partnerships with major healthcare corporations. Judicial determination based on comprehensive documentation that demonstrated scientific expertise and innovation development spanning 8 years of independent research. The legal framework prioritized mathematical evidence over emotional appeals, ensuring that intellectual property rights would be protected through established court procedures, rather than family relationship considerations or manufactured collaborative development narratives. The pharmaceutical industry professional associations responded to courtroom testimony through formal statements that acknowledged systematic patterns of credit appropriation, affecting female scientists whose innovations had been attributed to male colleagues or corporate administrators within family business structures. Their professional recognition established comprehensive framework for addressing intellectual property disputes, while promoting ethical standards that would protect future researchers from systematic exploitation disguised as collaborative enterprise development or inherited business advantages. The Securities and Exchange Commission initiated investigation into potential financial fraud involving misrepresentation of asset sources and intellectual property ownership in Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' corporate filings and investor communications. Federal inquiry that would establish regulatory compliance requirements for accurate attribution of innovation sources within publicly traded pharmaceutical companies. The oversight procedures prioritized mathematical accuracy over corporate marketing claims, ensuring that investment documentation would reflect authentic contribution recognition rather than manufactured business success narratives. Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Pharmaceutical Research at Princeton University Medical Center, issued public statement acknowledging Elena's scientific contributions to autoimmune therapeutic development, academic recognition that established professional credibility within research communities, that evaluated innovation merit based on technical achievement rather than family business connections or inherited social positioning. The institutional endorsement provided independent validation that transcended corporate relationships while supporting intellectual property ownership claims through peer review processes. The American Pharmaceutical Association convened emergency ethics committee meeting to address systemic issues revealed through courtroom proceedings. Professional organization response that would establish comprehensive guidelines for innovation attribution and revenue distribution within healthcare research environments. Their policy development prioritized scientific achievement recognition over administrative management, creating industry standards that would prevent future appropriation of intellectual property through family business structures or corporate ownership manipulation. Richard Blackstone received notification from pharmaceutical industry partners that licensing agreements and business development contracts would require comprehensive review and potential modification based on revelations about actual innovation sources and intellectual property ownership structures. The corporate communications indicated recognition that commercial relationships had been established under false premises regarding scientific contribution and technical expertise, requiring immediate clarification of business partnerships and revenue distribution arrangements that reflected authentic intellectual property ownership. The Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers Association announced policy changes that would require comprehensive disclosure of innovation sources and patent ownership structures in all industry communications and marketing materials, professional standards that prioritized accurate attribution over corporate positioning strategies. Their regulatory framework would prevent systematic credit appropriation while ensuring appropriate recognition for scientific achievements that generated commercial success through therapeutic development and regulatory approval processes. Victoria Blackstone received legal notification that charitable foundation activities would require immediate review of donation sources and regulatory compliance procedures, nonprofit oversight that reflected potential governance issues related to funding derived from appropriated intellectual property revenues. The foundation directors indicated necessity for comprehensive restructuring of philanthropic operations to ensure charitable activities reflected legitimate wealth sources rather than systematic exploitation of innovation achievements disguised as inherited business advantages. The Internal Revenue Service initiated audit procedures to examine potential tax fraud involving misrepresentation of income sources and asset ownership in Blackstone family financial filings. Federal investigation that would establish accurate taxation requirements for intellectual property revenues and licensing agreement income. The oversight procedures prioritized mathematical accuracy over family business narratives, ensuring that tax obligations would reflect authentic contribution recognition rather than manufactured collaborative development claims or inherited wealth assumptions. Caroline Blackstone Wells received notification from museum board directors that cultural organization leadership positions would require immediate clarification of funding sources and potential conflicts of interest related to appropriated pharmaceutical revenues, institutional governance procedures that reflected ethical standards for nonprofit administration. The cultural institutions indicated necessity for comprehensive review of charitable activities and donation sources to ensure organizational integrity and public accountability within established regulatory frameworks. The pharmaceutical industry investment community responded to courtroom revelations through comprehensive reassessment of Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' market valuation and competitive positioning, financial analysis that reflected recognition of actual innovation sources and intellectual property ownership structures. The investment evaluations prioritized documented achievement over corporate marketing claims, establishing authentic commercial worth based on scientific contribution rather than inherited business advantages or family relationship dynamics. Michael Blackstone received legal notification from trust fund administrators that estate management activities would require immediate restructuring based on revelations about asset sources and intellectual property ownership, financial oversight that reflected regulatory requirements for accurate wealth attribution and tax compliance procedures. The estate planning professionals indicated necessity for comprehensive revision of investment strategies and inheritance planning that reflected legitimate asset ownership rather than systematic appropriation of innovation revenues. The Federal Trade Commission announced investigation into potential antitrust violations involving pharmaceutical industry practices that systematically excluded female scientists from appropriate recognition and financial compensation for therapeutic innovations. Regulatory scrutiny that would establish comprehensive framework for addressing intellectual property disputes within healthcare research environments. Their enforcement procedures prioritized market competition integrity over family business relationships, ensuring fair commercial practices that reflected authentic innovation contribution rather than systematic credit appropriation. Dr. Jennifer Martinez received recognition from intellectual property law associations for establishing legal precedent that would protect future pharmaceutical researchers from systematic exploitation, professional acknowledgement that reflected comprehensive documentation approach, and strategic litigation methods that prioritized objective evidence over subjective interpretation. The legal community recognition established framework for addressing complex family business disputes involving intellectual property appropriation, while ensuring appropriate compensation for scientific achievements. The pharmaceutical industry regulatory compliance officers initiated comprehensive review of patent attribution practices and licensing agreement structures throughout healthcare research environments. Professional oversight that would establish industry standards for innovation recognition and revenue distribution, based on authentic contribution, rather than corporate positioning strategies. The regulatory framework prioritized scientific merit over administrative management, creating comprehensive protection for intellectual property rights within competitive pharmaceutical markets. Elena Vasquez received formal recognition from biochemical research organizations that acknowledged her pharmaceutical innovations and scientific contributions to autoimmune therapeutic development. Professional validation that established academic credibility within research communities that evaluated achievement based on technical merit rather than family business connections. The peer recognition provided independent confirmation of expertise and innovation capability that transcended social positioning while supporting continued research activities and commercial partnerships. The pharmaceutical industry professional development organizations announced educational initiatives that would address systematic patterns of credit appropriation affecting female scientists whose innovations had been attributed to male colleagues or family business structures, training programs that would promote ethical standards for intellectual property recognition, and appropriate financial compensation. The educational framework prioritized authentic achievement acknowledgement over collaborative development narratives that obscured individual contribution recognition within complex corporate relationships. The courtroom proceedings established comprehensive legal precedent that would influence future intellectual property disputes involving family business relationships and systematic appropriation of pharmaceutical innovations, judicial framework that prioritized documented evidence over emotional appeals, while ensuring appropriate recognition and financial compensation for scientific achievements. The legal standards created mathematical certainty for asset division procedures that reflected authentic contribution rather than manufactured collaborative enterprise development or inherited business advantages. The pharmaceutical industry oversight mechanisms responded to Elena's case through systematic policy changes that would prevent future appropriation of intellectual property, while ensuring appropriate recognition for scientific innovations within competitive healthcare research environments. The regulatory framework established comprehensive protection for female researchers whose contributions had been systematically undervalued through family business structures and corporate ownership manipulation, creating industry standards that prioritized authentic achievement over administrative management or inherited social positioning. The intellectual property law community recognized Elena's litigation approach as a landmark case that demonstrated effective strategies for addressing systematic credit appropriation while establishing comprehensive documentation requirements that would protect future pharmaceutical researchers from family business exploitation. The legal precedent created framework for ensuring scientific innovations would receive appropriate recognition and financial compensation through established court procedures rather than negotiated compromise or emotional appeals within complex relationship dynamics. The Blackstone Pharmaceuticals corporate headquarters experienced systematic operational paralysis as federal regulatory agencies implemented comprehensive audit procedures that suspended business activities pending resolution of intellectual property ownership disputes and potential fraud investigations. The pharmaceutical industry partnerships that had generated substantial licensing revenues faced immediate termination due to misrepresentation of innovation sources and patent attribution discrepancies that violated contractual agreements requiring accurate disclosure of scientific contribution and technical expertise underlying therapeutic development. Richard Blackstone received formal notification from pharmaceutical corporation executives that existing business relationships would be discontinued, pending clarification of actual innovation ownership and intellectual property rights. Commercial decisions that reflected industry recognition of systematic appropriation disguised as collaborative family enterprise development. The corporate communications indicated complete loss of professional credibility within healthcare research communities that evaluated business partnerships based on authentic scientific achievement rather than inherited social positioning or administrative management competence. The Greenwich Country Club Membership Committee convened emergency session to address potential reputational concerns related to systematic intellectual property appropriation that had been documented through comprehensive legal proceedings, social institution response that reflected community standards for ethical business conduct, and authentic achievement recognition. The exclusive organization indicated necessity for immediate clarification of member standing and potential suspension of privileges pending resolution of federal investigations and regulatory compliance issues affecting family business operations. Victoria Blackstone faced complete restructuring of charitable foundation activities as nonprofit regulatory oversight agencies investigated funding sources and governance procedures related to donations derived from appropriated pharmaceutical revenues, institutional scrutiny that revealed systematic patterns of financial misrepresentation disguised as philanthropic generosity. The foundation board directors indicated immediate suspension of charitable giving activities and comprehensive review of organizational compliance with nonprofit regulations that required accurate disclosure of donation sources and ethical fund management practices. The Blackstone family estate in Greenwich underwent asset seizure procedures as federal agencies implemented forensic accounting protocols to determine legitimate ownership of luxury properties and investment portfolios that had been purchased through appropriated intellectual property revenues. Legal actions that reflected judicial determinations about authentic wealth sources versus systematic exploitation of innovation achievements. The property valuation assessments prioritized documented evidence over family business narratives, while establishing mathematical framework for appropriate asset reallocation based on actual contribution recognition. Caroline Blackstone Wells received notification from museum board directors that cultural organization leadership positions would be terminated due to ethical concerns related to funding sources and potential conflicts of interest involving appropriated pharmaceutical revenues, institutional decisions that reflected governance standards for nonprofit administration, and public accountability requirements. The cultural institutions implemented immediate policy changes requiring comprehensive disclosure of board member financial sources to prevent future governance issues related to systematic intellectual property appropriation. The pharmaceutical industry investment community initiated systematic reassessment of Blackstone family business valuations and market positioning, as evidence revealed complete dependence on appropriated innovations rather than authentic business development or inherited entrepreneurial advantages, financial analysis that eliminated speculative corporate worth based on manufactured collaborative narratives. The investment evaluations established actual commercial value through documented intellectual property ownership, while exposing decades of systematic credit appropriation disguised as inherited pharmaceutical industry expertise. Michael Blackstone experienced comprehensive dissolution of trust fund management responsibilities as estate planning attorneys discovered that investment portfolios had been entirely dependent on appropriated pharmaceutical patent revenues rather than inherited family wealth or traditional asset accumulation strategies. Professional oversight that required immediate restructuring of financial obligations and inheritance planning procedures. The wealth management professionals indicated necessity for complete revision of estate administration practices that reflected legitimate asset ownership rather than systematic exploitation of innovation revenues. The Federal Bureau of Investigation expanded criminal investigation to include potential RICO violations involving organized patterns of intellectual property theft and financial fraud within pharmaceutical industry operations. Federal scrutiny that established comprehensive framework for prosecuting systematic appropriation disguised as family business collaboration or inherited corporate advantages. The investigation procedures prioritized mathematical evidence over social narratives while ensuring appropriate criminal penalties for systematic exploitation of scientific achievements through complex family business structures. Richard's professional reputation within pharmaceutical industry circles underwent complete collapse, as business associates discovered systematic patterns of credit appropriation that had enabled unearned recognition and commercial success through appropriated innovations, professional consequences that reflected industry standards for authentic achievement, and scientific contribution recognition. The healthcare research communities implemented comprehensive exclusion from future partnership opportunities and collaborative development projects that required genuine expertise rather than inherited social positioning or administrative management competence. The pharmaceutical industry regulatory compliance officers initiated systematic review of licensing agreement practices throughout healthcare research environments to prevent future intellectual property appropriation and ensure appropriate recognition for scientific innovations. Professional oversight that established comprehensive protection for female researchers whose contributions had been systematically undervalued through family business structures and corporate ownership manipulation. The regulatory framework prioritized authentic achievement over collaborative development narratives that obscured individual contribution recognition within complex relationship dynamics. Victoria's social standing within Connecticut cultural communities experienced systematic erosion, as charitable organizations and social institutions discovered that philanthropic activities had been funded through appropriated pharmaceutical revenues rather than inherited family wealth or authentic business success. Reputational consequences that reflected community standards for ethical conduct and legitimate achievement recognition. The social exclusion indicated comprehensive recognition that generous charitable giving had been enabled through systematic intellectual property exploitation rather than inherited entrepreneurial advantages. The Blackstone family business operations faced complete operational shutdown as pharmaceutical industry partners implemented immediate termination of licensing agreements and commercial relationships due to misrepresentation of innovation sources and patent ownership structures. Business consequences that reflected industry recognition of systematic appropriation disguised as collaborative enterprise development. The commercial isolation indicated comprehensive loss of professional credibility within healthcare research communities that evaluated partnership opportunities based on authentic scientific achievement rather than inherited social positioning. Caroline experienced systematic removal from cultural organization leadership positions as museum boards and nonprofit institutions implemented governance reforms requiring comprehensive disclosure of funding sources and ethical standards for board member financial backgrounds. Institutional decisions that reflected recognition of systematic appropriation disguised as inherited family philanthropy. The cultural exclusion indicated community standards for authentic achievement and legitimate wealth sources, rather than systematic exploitation of intellectual property innovations. The pharmaceutical industry professional associations implemented comprehensive policy changes, requiring accurate attribution of innovation sources and patent ownership structures in all industry communications and business development activities. Regulatory framework that established protection for scientific researchers whose contributions had been systematically appropriated through family business relationships and corporate ownership manipulation. The professional standards prioritized authentic achievement recognition over administrative management or inherited social positioning within competitive healthcare research environments. Michael's financial planning expertise became irrelevant, as trust fund assets underwent complete reallocation based on judicial determinations about legitimate intellectual property ownership and appropriate compensation for systematic appropriation of pharmaceutical innovations. Professional obsolescence that reflected recognition of authentic contribution versus inherited wealth management responsibilities. The estate administration dissolution indicated comprehensive transformation from inherited privilege to earned recognition based on documented achievement, rather than family business narratives or social positioning strategies. The federal regulatory agencies established comprehensive oversight protocols for pharmaceutical industry intellectual property practices that would prevent future systematic appropriation of scientific innovations while ensuring appropriate recognition and financial compensation for authentic research achievements. Institutional framework that prioritized mathematical evidence over family business relationships or manufactured collaborative development narratives. The regulatory protection created industry standards that reflected genuine scientific contribution rather than administrative management or inherited corporate advantages. Richard's business education credentials underwent systematic devaluation as pharmaceutical industry professionals recognized complete absence of scientific expertise or innovation capability, underlying decades of professional recognition and commercial success. Educational irrelevance that reflected industry standards for authentic achievement versus inherited social positioning or family business advantages. The professional exclusion indicated comprehensive recognition that administrative competence could not substitute for genuine scientific innovation or intellectual property creation within competitive healthcare research environments. The Blackstone Family Social Network experienced systematic dissolution as community organizations and professional associations implemented ethical standards requiring legitimate achievement recognition rather than inherited privilege or systematic intellectual property appropriation. Social consequences that reflected recognition of authentic contribution versus manufactured collaborative enterprise narratives. The comprehensive exclusion indicated community standards for genuine success rather than systematic exploitation of innovation achievements disguised as inherited family business advantages or charitable philanthropic activities. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.